Well, we're talking now about Shakespeare's Macbeth, which is regarded as one of Shakespeare's great tragedies, in the same league really as Othello, King Lear and Hamlet. And in an earlier video in the series, we were talking about a tragedy really at the very beginning of what we call Western civilization. That was Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, which is often described as being a tragedy of fate, and a distinction that's sometimes made between ancient tragedy and Shakespearean tragedy is that whereas ancient tragedies are normally tragedies of fate, Shakespeare's tragedies are normally tragedies of character. In other words, the tragic action issues not out of some preordained set of circumstances, but out of some character flaw in the main character. And in this case, Macbeth's tragic flaw is sometimes taken to be ambition. Nonetheless, this play, sometimes called the Scottish play, is a play that actually interrogates the tension between a tragedy of fate and a tragedy of character, because the tragic action is actually foreshadowed by these preternatural creatures, these witches, who tell Macbeth what he is going to be. The Thane of Cawdor, which is the title that he has at the beginning of the play, is going to become the Thane of Cawdor, and thereafter is going to be the King of the Scots. And what unfolds then is how that prophecy comes to be realised. And in the case of Macbeth, he acts in a way to ensure that those things do in fact happen. Now, I'm joined again by Laurel Moffat and Colin Dray. I want to begin, it might seem like an unlikely place, but on this question of the Thane of Cawdor, because when the play begins, Macbeth is of course not the Thane of Cawdor, and there is a Thane of Cawdor who is actually a traitor to King Duncan in the war between the Scots and Norway, between the Scots and the Norwegians. The Thane of Cawdor has betrayed the Scots and is fighting with the Norwegians. And we're told that the Thane of Cawdor, even though he's been a traitor, he actually ends his life nobly. So in Act 1, Scene 4, Malcolm says to Duncan, "I have spoke with one that saw him die, who did report that very frankly he confessed his treasons, implored your Highness's pardon, and set forth a deep repentance. Nothing in his life became him like the leaving it. He died as one that had been studied in his death to throw away the dearest thing he owed, as 'twere a careless trifle." Now, Duncan then says there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust. And then Duncan goes on to show how he can see through this now. And yet, of course, what subsequently happens is that Macbeth, who is given the title Thane of Cawdor, proves the truth of Duncan's statement. There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. Macbeth, of course, is going to betray Duncan by killing him in order to become the King of the Scots. So
it is, can I say, this is uncommon to a lot of Shakespeare's plays in that there isn't really a clown. It's not a hugely comic play. You've got that porter scene where he's pretending to be the porter at the door of hell. But it is very funny in that dark, dramatic irony that runs through there. The king, in particular, saying, "Well, I'll never be deceived by a Thane of Cawdor again. Now let me go over here and get murdered by the Thane." Sorry.
No, that's it. I mean, where I was going was this moment of death. We've got this person who has been a traitor, who then nonetheless dies what was regarded at the time as a good death. This play, of course, is performed in an England that is Christian. There's a division between Catholics and Protestants in England at the time, in the late 16th, early 17th century. But the predominant ethos is Christian, and we're given a story here of the Thane of Cawdor, the first Thane of Cawdor, who dies repentant and in good grace.
Yes.
And it's a happy death. We see another happy death at the end with young Saywood. Also dies as a man, we're told.
That's right. Like, where were the wounds on the front?
Right.
Then he died nobly. Like, as in he wasn't fleeing it; he was actually standing up.
That's right.
For something.
And then, by contrast, we have Macbeth. Now he confronts death, so he doesn't sort of shirk. He doesn't run away, but nonetheless, he doesn't die a good death in the sense that he dies absolutely immersed in evil. He has really embraced evil. And he's crippled throughout by this bad conscience, as his wife is. So let's explore that.
Well, I was thinking when you brought up Thane of Cawdor with the death, the two things he seems to leave with is that deep repentance, like you mentioned, like not just repentance, deep repentance, and then being able to not throw away, but seeing things as if they aren't the most valuable thing. Like, actually, I'm not saying it very clearly, but to throw away the dearest thing he owed as to a quick, careless trifle. So that perspective, I guess, where he can see value where value lies, and then see things that are trifles, they are trifles.
Yes.
So that kind of clarity, to die with clarity of vision. In contrast, I think Macbeth, where he dies clutching, you know, where he's
Really?
Well, the deaths that he enacts, you know, the murders, they just keep going, don't they? He, like, as in he keeps grasping for the thing that he wanted. But even that, like, is that what he wanted? I don't know. It's just, it's all consuming.
Well, he says to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus.
Right.
You know,
so his suspicion
he gets the
lies
crown,
everywhere.
thinks, well, now I've arrived, and then, oh, hang on. It's not enough to have taken the throne. Now I've got to preserve it, make it safe. And the only way to make it safe is to just kill more and more people.
Against any perceived threat.
Yes.
Which it's a very consuming, and it's not just ambition, it's that vaulting ambition that o'erleaps itself. It's just over the top, isn't it? He's over the top.
Yeah.
Can I have a slightly nutty take on this play?
Yeah.
I actually think that Shakespeare sets up this comparison of the deaths between the two Thanes of Cawdor, because in a weird way he is celebrating Macbeth's final action of full-blown evil. Not that he's saying, isn't it great to be evil, but that Macbeth is a character whose greatest flaw is that conflict in himself that you guys are talking about, is that sense of he's never in the moment. And I've got a whole thing about time that I'll get to in a minute. But he's never in the moment. He's always fretting over something that's past, that he cannot regather, or bewildered by...
What's done is done.
Exactly, or looking toward the future, which of course is his greatest mistake, is that he hears that he's going to be the king. He doesn't go, well, for a moment he says, well, maybe fate will just drop that in my lap. And suddenly he decides, no, I've got to kill some people to get this. And then of course that pursuit of the future leads him further on. He's never just in the moment being himself, except when he's a soldier. Like the moment that he's celebrated, that the kings and all the other fellow soldiers celebrate.
Carving his way.
Yeah, because it's a moment of action.
Valor's minion.
But are you saying he is himself when he's killing?
Yes. Or no, in the beginning,
soldier.
when he's a soldier, because he has no imagination. He doesn't have the capacity for imagination. He's a weapon. And when he's utilized as a weapon by a king who tells him what to do, or
by his wife.
By his wife, and but when he's used as a weapon and there's a clarity of purpose that is owned by somebody else, he's heroic and he's incredible. And he
actually said, I mean, that's one of the things he wants to enjoy.
Yes.
Before he kills Duncan, he's saying to Lady Macbeth, well, can't I just enjoy this? Everyone loves what I've just done.
Yes.
Why do I have to go and kill the king to become the king, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Let's just live in this moment for...
And I think the action of killing the king in pursuit of the future then locks him in the past, because he's got to clean up the mess that's been created and try and stop all of these other complications from unfolding. And it's only at the end of the play when he realises he's lost Lady Macbeth, he can't regain his honour, everyone knows he's a scumbag, the whole country's revolting against him. In that final moment, he decides, okay then, I'll be evil. I can't convince myself that there is a good part of my soul left anymore. I'll just become unrepentant evil and throw myself into the fray. And there's a weird clarity that he regains in that. Of course, it's not something you should emulate. Don't be evil. But in a sense, he
But it's interesting
recaptures.
though, when he sees Macduff at the end, he says, "Oh, you know, I've already got too much blood on my hands from your family. Like, are you sure you want to be here?" So I think there is still a moment, I mean, before the moment you've described, where he's saying, "I'm not really sure I want to do this."
Yeah,
but then
he's kind of goading him as well.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is.
Hey, remember how I killed your family?
Yeah, but he's also actually looking at his, you know, again, bringing this into the context of the time, he's looking at his eternal destiny.
Yeah.
And he says, you know, I'm already going to get punished for killing all your family. I'm not sure I really want to add something else to my punishment by killing you as well. But of course, he's there's great bravado at that moment before Macduff says, well, you know, I was ripped untimely from my mother's womb, so I wasn't technically born of woman. Yeah. So there's a moment of bravado where he thinks, notwithstanding the evidence that, you know, Birnam Wood has now come to Dunsinane, he thinks somehow he could still pull it off, I think, until Macduff says, well, I've got some news for you.
Well, there is that fascinating kind of build of arrogance that he has. The witches give him this prophecy that he misinterprets. But then when he returns to them in that stupid fourth act, that's a sloppy act, but he goes back in the fourth act and demands that they give him more prophecies. He thinks suddenly that he has power over the supernatural. The sense of arrogance that he's developed, that he can then control fate. He's no longer just reacting to it, but that he's taken agency in pursuing the coming of what is prophesized. It sort of, I think, leads to that. He hears a prophecy and he's so blinded by his sense of importance that he doesn't actually tease out the ramifications of it, he thinks.
Well, or he moves very quickly, you know, as in that whole, he overleaps himself. He unlike a detective, unlike someone who is forensic in their analysis of the situation, he jumps to conclusions.
Yes.
He's very quick, too quick perhaps.
Unlike Hamlet, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the complaint that so many people have had in the past is that, oh, Hamlet's not acting. No, he's very methodical.
Yeah.
He's taking his sweet time. Yeah. But Macbeth's quite different, isn't he? And this, you mentioned time. I mean, time is very important. And the idea of doubling, things seem to get faster and faster as the play progresses until it's a mess, isn't it? It's just, well, you mentioned time. And in this play, time is very important, isn't it? As in, it gets mentioned a number of times, but also things seem to speed up. And it's also mentioned with doubling, things double.
And there's things are compacted. You know, Lady Macbeth talks about the future in the instant. I feel the future in the instant. You know, so you're going to be king, and I feel it now. You are. Yeah,
but also, does he want it now? You know, as in, you say this, when I will make it happen for myself. It's interesting too. You mentioned how the witches, where he wants to control or, you know, demands more prophecy, which they say, no, that's not our job, we're done here. But at the same time, he's plagued by apparitions and ghosts, like they're the ones that the witches offer, but then he sees Banquo's ghost. So much of that.
And he sees the line of
the lines of kings and stuff. But even at the banquet, right, he doesn't sit in a chair because he thinks someone's there. Like, it's so real.
Yeah.
Of course, I was thinking about it afterwards. It's like, oh man, he sees these things. It's like, wait, that means we see it too. The audience, like when we watch the play or when we read it, we see the apparitions. We're like Macbeth, which I think, is this the mirror? Is this what, you know, Shakespeare's saying? Hey, take a look at yourself, what you may be grasping,
the dagger is the other one.
Yes, the dagger.
The dagger. So
which is pointing. It is, and then blood appears.
Is this the dagger that I see before me?
That's right.
It's the dagger.
That dagger is kind of representative of what I was talking about before, his lack of imagination and his because he imagines a dagger.
You could say an overactive imagination, couldn't you?
I guess you could. I think it's more that he's asked to have an imagination. The prophecy has kicked into gear a longing that he didn't really know was in himself. He's a soldier. He's celebrated for it. He's beloved for it. In fact, the king just thinks he's wonderful, and all of his fellow soldiers respect him utterly. He hears this prophecy, and suddenly he starts, sequestering himself from his brothers. All the asides that begin in the play start from that moment where he starts, maybe I could be king, and maybe and it leads to this sense of him imagining his way to kingship that requires this dagger. But even in that act of imagination, he needs the dagger to lead him. Again, he's constantly looking for somebody to tell him what to do.
Yeah.
First it was his king, then it's his wife. He needs her to kick him into gear, to make him do it, question his manhood so that he can go and commit the act. And then even by himself, in that sort of final trudge down the corridor toward killing his king, he requires an imaginary dagger to lead him forward. It's like, okay, I'll follow you. Not I want to go and kill him, but you're a fantasy maybe, or you're a spirit, and I will let you tell me what to do. It's very.
But could it not be his excessive ambition or excessive desire for something that's been foretold? So it's like sparks something perhaps, but the Renaissance idea, like in Renaissance psychology, you have the reason, you have the will, you have desire, and when they're not in the right relationship, you can have desire which is going ahead of reason, which then you're using to the will then follows. And I don't know, I wonder if this is also a picture of him like following that dagger. If the dagger is the representation of what he desires, or the means by which he gets what he desires, which is the death of the king and enables him to then take that place, and the death of others, I guess, as well. Is this emblematic of excessive desire, where it's not bound by reason and not bound by will?
I think definitely. And I think that's what I was very poorly trying to articulate before, is that sense of Macbeth is, like all of Shakespeare's tragic characters, is a character at war with himself, but it's so exquisitely articulated here where he doesn't even know what his desires are, what the ramifications of them are, how to even bring them about. And I think that, his imagination, or his willingness to be bewildered by his imagination, is a representation of that he's pulled in multiple directions and frustrated about it. He keeps complaining about, I've committed all this murder and I can't ever be happy, and my mind is full of scorpions and all that stuff. It's only at the end when he goes, okay, forget imagination, I'll just be a weapon again, a completely evil weapon. But he seems to be able to regather himself for one final blast of autonomy, at least.
Yeah.
There is a point. Sorry, you go on.
Well, it does make you wonder, does he know himself at any point?
Definitely not.
Yeah, but even at the point of, I'll be a weapon,
Yeah.
does he ever have a sense of knowing himself? Because that's partly the real tragedy, I think, of not having any kind of recognition of himself, his place, who he is as a person.
There's stuff in there about him wearing costumes and outfits. Shakespeare's
borrowed robes.
They hang upon him like a dwarf, wearing like large robes. His crown doesn't fit quite right. Is constantly like a little kid in a costume. Seems to be part of his paranoia. And later, when he wants his armor on to feel more like himself, to be that weapon again.
So like a mask, almost like a masked person.
Yeah.
Not true to himself. Fascinating.
Let's finish. I just want to foreshadow something for further discussions, both between ourselves and with the students, and that is the role of Lady Macbeth, and the point that you made earlier, that what she uses to instrumentalise, Macbeth, is this.
To weaponize him?
To weaponize him, is this sense of inadequacy that he feels about his own manhood, which she constantly stirs up.
Yeah.
You know, she's constantly challenging him, saying that he's unmanly.
Yeah, and
that
almost
he's-
like she sets the terms
Yes.
and the definition for what is a man. She's like that feeling,
Yes.
you know, feeling any kind of remorse. That's not a man. This
That's
is a man,
right.
which is very different from a Renaissance notion of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Which is knowing your place
Yeah.
and actually knowing where you fit.
within the great chain of being.
Within the great chain of being, and having a sense of humility about
Yeah.
that, but knowing that you're partly amazing, right?
Yeah.
A little lower than the angels. You're
Yeah.
this incredible being who, with a mind and a heart and a body, but you're also a dusty thing.
Yeah.
You know, and to have that kind of sense of self, where
Yeah.
she's like, no, let's weaponize you.
Yes, that's right.
And it works so well that he then awkwardly tries to employ it on the murderers a couple of
Yeah.
scenes later. It's like, what are you men? They're like,
Yeah.
I'm a man. Like, are you a man?
You go by the name of man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
you're like what is it, like curs and spaniels or dogs?
Yeah, they all go by the name of dog,
Yeah.
but they're very different. Yeah.
And even her description of what she would do as a woman,
Yes.
that horrid description of what she would do to her own infant,
Yeah.
who she's
that's right.
nursing, that
Yeah.
she'd be willing to kill her own
Dash its
child.
brains out.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
like, whoa. But
Yeah.
you realize, wow, we've gone pretty far here.
Yeah.
You know.
She says that, but at the same time, when she says, I would have killed Duncan, except he looked like my father.
Yeah.
So there is an interesting thing going on there.
Well, there's
of familial
Isn't
relations.
that interesting?
Yeah.
There's also that
Yeah.
sense, just to throw this out there, because I do feel like Lady Macbeth, she's evil. Again, I'm not trying to say that she's great.
We'll make this the last point.
Oh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there is a sense in which Lady Macbeth, I think too frequently in criticism of this play, gets turned into the maniacal evil creature that turns Macbeth into a monster, that somehow she should bear all of the blame for his descent into evil, when I think the play is suggesting that it's far more nuanced and complicated than that. Firstly, Macbeth has the thought of killing Duncan before she ever turns up. And secondly, there is that sense in which she says, okay, in order to stir him into action, I have to give myself over to evil. So fill me up, dire spirits, with blackness and darkness. And yet, almost immediately, Shakespeare presents the lie that is in that desire. That I would commit murder, I would definitely kill him, except he reminds me of my father, which is an act of human empathy and regard that clearly somebody devolved into evil could not commit.
Thank you both.